Look, I've heard a lot of people ask, can we talk about the MLB draft? Because the Orioles, what the hell are they doing? That's a lot of questions that I got, a lot of comments, because the Orioles took 2 catchers in the first round. So I'm going to explain all of what that means, what I think about it, and a whole hell of a lot more. But before I do all that, hit that like and subscribe button if you guys don't mind. Helps out the channel a lot. People helping people, and that would be great. So let's dive into this now, shall we? Right. So if you've watched the Baltimore Orioles this year, you have noticed that the weakness has been pitching. And if you want to go to the minor leagues, you're going to look at there and say, well, the team's weakness is also pitching depth. They don't have a lot of it. They also haven't done a great job at developing their pitchers in-house and getting to the big leagues. And actually, since Mike Elias took over as general manager of the Baltimore Orioles, they haven't had more than one player be a drafted pitcher, make the club, and help the team. That pitcher is Cade Stroud. The other one who made it but wasn't drafted by the Orioles, but he came up through the system, they signed him, was Brandon Young. Everyone else has been either previous regime or traded in from another organization, right? So that's one thing. But because of all of that, everyone's sitting there going, well, they need to take a pitcher. In one of their first 4 picks that they have, there was 4 picks in the first 40 selections for the Birds on Sunday night. And not only did the Orioles not take a pitcher, it's who they took with 2 of their first picks. Because if you look at one of the strengths in the Orioles organization, at least right now, it might be at their talent level at the catching position. Number 1 overall pick, former Adley Rutschman. I know he's hurt right now, but that's their starting catcher in the bigs. And then they have Sam Basayo, who is the top catching prospect in all of baseball, who's just banging down the door in AAA ready to come on up, right? So the Orioles then decide to take 2 catchers, Ike Irish and Caden Bodine, with their first 2 picks there. And I saw the reactions. I said, Ryan, you got to explain what it all means. Well, let me go back a little bit further to explain Mike Elias a little bit more for those that don't understand his draft strategy, right? So Mike Elias has been known to draft a lot of college bats. You've seen it. And yes, he took Jackson Holiday, high school kid, son of Matt Holiday, which also shout out the Holiday family. Ethan Holiday went 4th overall to the Colorado Rockies. It's a full family moment because that's where Matt Holiday was drafted and started his career with the Rockies, became a legend out there in Colorado. But yeah, Mike has a certain style. And to explain why he has that style, there's 2 analysts I want you guys to listen to clips. We had him on the Ryan Ripken show, which, by the way, you should tune in every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday to hear more. But let's start with Jim Callis, who writes for MLB.com and MLB Pipeline. And this was Jim Callis on how general managers should approach every draft, especially early on when it comes to getting the best talent. Who you think is the best available that can continue to skyrocket you?
You should take the best available guy. I don't think they would force a pitcher just to take a pitcher, even though that isn't. And however many pitchers they have on the board, if those guys are gone, they might just go hitter with those top 3 picks.
And yeah, they did go hitter, by the way. But Jim's first words, best player available. And if you're from the Baltimore region, that might sound a little bit familiar because the Baltimore Ravens live by that. Take the best player available. And got to throw out, Jim Callis is a Steelers fan, and he has hated the way the Ravens have drafted because early on they take that best player, and typically it's worked out well for them. So that's number 1. Then number 2, to even explain why Mike doesn't like taking pitchers early. He's had experience with it when he was over with the Houston Astros, and we talked to Keith Law, who writes for The Athletic, has been doing this for about 25 years. But he explained why Mike Elias has not been as receptive to drafting pitchers early because guess what? He got burned while he was over in Houston.
A lot of picks. Somewhere in there, they'll take a pitcher. And they have done that. Mike Elias just seems to be philosophically against leading off his draft with a pitcher. He has had bad experiences with that. Brady Aiken, Mark Capel, Forrest Whitley. He's not going there. And to me, that's fine. First of all, you have to hit on your first round pick.
So Keith's saying right there names Brady Aiken, Mark Appel. And Brady Aiken was actually during my time coming into professional baseball. And I remember like, Kieran, that guy was a dude. This was going to be a great pick for them. And Brady didn't even sign. And Mark Appel, they had issues as well with signing him. And so, you know what? I'm sure Mike Elias took that with him and said, you know what? The value for drafting a pitcher there isn't really worth it. And we're going to wait maybe a little bit longer to go after pitching arms, because here's the other factor that goes into this is that it's not a matter of if pitchers get hurt anymore. It's a when. Pitchers get hurt more than ever nowadays because of how the game is. You spin it, you throw with velo, Tommy John's left and right. It's really, you get a Tommy John and you get a Tommy John, right? It feels like Oprah. That's where, for people that aren't as aware, Oprah, there was a show and there's a meme out there, right? Just giving away. You get one, you get one. But I digress. But it's not just the Orioles, by the way, here. Like, I want to actually pull up the first 40 picks from last night as a whole here. So bear with me for 2 seconds. And we're going to share the screen so you guys can see what I'm talking about. This is MLB.com yesterday, tracking the draft. So you see right there. All right. We're going through this list. And you see a lot of shortstops, especially in the top 10, 14 picks. And then as you keep going down, right, there's not a lot of P's there for pitcher. So you're probably wondering, going, well, wait, where are all these guys? And if I even extend past to the list of the comp picks, and that's to the top 40 picks, 10 pitchers got selected in the first 40 picks. So if I do my math correctly, that means 75% of the first 40 picks were, in fact, position players. Now, at the top of the draft, though, you saw teams like the Angels and the Mariners take two of the top college arms in their mind, right? Cade Anderson, LSU, was a guy that they thought could flirt with going number 1 overall. He drops to 3. And then Ethan Holiday, who was the number 1 overall prospect by many people out there, he drops to 4, and now he's going to the Rockies, like we've talked about, right? And the draft is so unpredictable. We don't know what the hell can happen. But I just want to make that point out. It's not just a Mike Elias thing. Other teams have gone into this. Well, let's go a little bit deeper into this conversation, because I've heard then, well, all right, if you're not going to take a pitcher early, when are you going to take a risk on them? Because you know, if you're not going to go out and get them in via trades or free agency, you got to do something. You got to draft them. Well, they did actually draft quite a lot of pitchers here, by the way. And we'll dive into that whole pitcher side here a little bit later on, because they have taken a lot of pitchers within the first 12 rounds of the Major League Baseball draft. But let's go back to this catching side. All right. Ike Irish, Caden Bodine, I'm sorry. Caden Bodine. These are two guys where you're going, that's not a need. Well, let's go by best player available in this situation. If you got the profile on Ike Irish, first off, electric name. Ike Irish, amazing. But Ike was considered one of the best bats in all of baseball in college. He played outfield because he fractured his scapula, and he said, screw it, I'm going to continue to play, and still continue to play at a high clip. But they thought at the catching position with his power, Ike Irish is one of the best bats. That's a value right there, and he was valued by some to be as high as 11th overall as a prospect, and he fell to 19th. Then you got Caden Bodine, who is by many is considered the best defensive catcher in the class, coming out of Coastal. Great year, low strikeout rate, which I know a lot of people talk about swing and missing. So did Ike Irish, by the way. So you get two catchers that don't strike out a lot, that have the ability to play the position, and adds more depth into this. And I actually really like the moves. And I know you're looking, how does that help us now? Well, the draft in general, if you're expecting any of these guys to help you right now or next year, you know, that's a tough stretch, even with them being college guys, because you got to let them get comfortable, and everyone develops at different stages. And yeah, if you've seen the Orioles, it's been a carousel, merry-go-round of catchers at the big league level, because catching is so demanding and a lot of guys can get injured. Now, we don't know what the future is going to hold with a guy like Adley Rutschman. I still believe in Adley overall. I think he's a talented player. But you also have Sam Basayo, who I don't know if they have committed to him being the priority or the priority catcher, the one that's going to, sorry, not priority, primary. There's the word, primary catcher. Because I think they want to have Sam's bat in the lineup because they know that that bat has so much value that's why he's been playing so much first. And then he's going to DH. So I could see one of these catchers, maybe that's how things can work out down the stretch. But it's so far away, you take value. And you want to talk about value. And Jim Cowles is talking about that they might just take a hitter, and another hitter. Well, they did that by taking Villavi Uloy. And Villavi. And if you're looking for value, look who the Orioles then took after the two catchers in Villavi Uloy, who was the Golden Spikes Award winner and played shortstop for the Arkansas Razorbacks. Pig Suey. And he was sensational this year. He was great. So now you're getting a great athlete with college experience who, he could play short, but maybe he can factor into playing other positions. So that's one thing to keep in mind moving forward there for the Orioles. Like, you got good value. And don't take it from me on this case. A lot of other people were really happy with these selections. Let's start with what Dan O'Dowd said, and shout out Steve Molesky at Steve on Baseball. Used to work with Masson. But Steve tweeted this out yesterday that the analysts like what the O's are doing. After their first 3 picks, former GM Dan O'Dowd said they've got a plus hitter in Irish, they got a plus power in Eloy, and they got a guy who is an elite college defensive catcher who is a switch hitter. And I think they've killed it, quite honestly. So that's one right there. And actually, Baseball America loved the Orioles' really first 5 picks. They thought that the Orioles got 5 of the top 50 prospects according to their rankings. Was Slater DeBrun, high school outfielder that apparently it's got a little music game to him as well. Produce. I got to check more of that out. That's a side note. And then Joseph Giroux, which might not actually fit the normal profile of pitchers because Joseph is not a power pitcher, but he has swing and miss stuff. And this is what we want to talk about the pitching side here, is that the Orioles then did put draft capital in and high draft capital into some of these pitchers. So let's go back to that list real quickly on the Orioles. Okay. Little whammy here. So second round, 58th overall, they get Joseph Giroux out of Michigan State, right? And then their next pick is another pitcher out of Georgia, JT Quinn. Righty and a lefty, both big dudes. But Giroux, let's start with him because I mentioned it's not a normal profile that the Orioles might consider going after. And let me explain that with this graphic here that MLB Network had the other day, because I think it's very telling. So you're looking at the MLB average on the right. It's strike percentage, 64%, whip percentage, 22%, average height, 6'3", and the average Major League fastball is 94.4. But Giroux, those 91.6, he's 6'8", but he has a 72% strike percentage and a 29% whiff. That means guys aren't picking up the pitch. Now, I know you're wondering, 6'8", he should be able to sling that and throw it harder. And maybe over time, getting into the minor leagues, he could. But I think what's really encouraging is, and I tell people this, you got to pitch to your strength. Giroux's strength is using his deception and being 6'8" when he's releasing the baseball. He's releasing it so far out there that 91.6, I guarantee you, can feel like 95, 96, right? So if he can add some velo to his fastball right now, I think he can be even better. And then obviously he's going to have to develop some more of his off-speed pitches. But the Orioles did take some high draft capital. And typically I've heard that, Mike Elias wants to wait until the 4th round to start looking at pitchers. And sure enough, they took 2 pitchers within the first 69 picks of this year's draft. And if you want to go further down here, they got 8 pitchers in the first 12 rounds. Think about that. 8 in the first 12 rounds, which they did then go after a need. but it was during at their moment, at their right time, if that makes sense, right? And I do think at some point that if you really like a guy and a pitcher, you got to take a risk for a first round pick at some point if you really like him. I mean, hell, look at Paul Skeens, number 1 overall pick, surefire. You're taking that dude because of the upside, right? But just because they're going early on for pitchers doesn't mean it's always going to work out. So, and it's not just Mike Elias. I wanted to emphasize that. That's more teams that have this philosophy on what they need to do and how things are moving forward. You want to try to find value. I think the Orioles got a lot of value. I'm not sweating, again, the catcher picks because I think that they got 2 guys that can really help this ball club moving forward. But I do understand, Birdland, you're frustrated because you're not seeing prospects either develop the way that you won in the big leagues. The team's having a rough year, and you don't feel as good about where the team is at this current moment in time. But I think these guys can be really good assets. And let's see how this develops here. And also, by the way, the Orioles then in-house, Jordan Westberg became an all-star. You had Colton Cowser, who has developed into a guy that can be an all-star, in my opinion. And then you got Gunnar Henderson. I'm buying the Adley Rutschman bounce back, and Jackson Holiday just missed out on being an all-star. So this nucleus of team is really good still. But don't be worried about the Orioles taking 2 catchers. Might make you stress, but I think these 2 catchers can be really good. And maybe we'll see some moves here down the stretch that maybe make things make sense as we move forward. But if you guys enjoyed the video and you got to the end of this, hit that like and subscribe one more time. Let me know you got to the end of the video. And then come join me tomorrow because we're live again Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday right here on YouTube, X, and Facebook. Have a day, have a night, guys. Cheers.